Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Lecture 1, Introduction to Narrative Structure. Today we're diving into a fascinating approach to understanding stories called structuralism. For a very long time, literary and cultural analysis focused heavily on individual story elements, the unique characters, the intricate plot twists, the specific historical context of a narrative. But structuralism completely revolutionized this by shifting our focus dramatically. Instead of just looking at the unique parts of a single story, structuralism asks a profound question. What are the universal patterns that govern all narratives? Are there underlying rules, almost like a hidden grammar or a deep code, that shape how stories work, no matter where they come from, what cultural context they belong to, or what medium they're presented in? It seeks to uncover the fundamental, recurring blueprints beneath the seemingly endless variety of individual tales. This morning, we'll introduce some core concepts that are central to this analytical approach, such as functions, the irreducible actions that drive a story, and schemata, the overarching frameworks that organize narratives. We'll then explore in detail why structural analysis is so important for understanding human communication and culture. And finally, we'll lay the groundwork for understanding the groundbreaking contributions of two key figures in narrative structuralism, Vladimir Propp and Claude Bremond. Structuralism in narrative analysis. At its heart, structuralism examines narratives not as isolated, unique works, but as systems governed by underlying rules. Think of it like language. When we speak, we use individual words and sentences, parole. But our ability to do so relies on a shared, underlying system of grammar and vocabulary, lang. Structuralists believe that narratives operate in a similar way. Every individual story is a manifestation of a deeper, universal narrative lang. This shift in perspective allowed scholars to move beyond mere description of stories to a more scientific, systematic analysis of their deep structures. Let's unpack a few key ideas that structuralists developed to articulate this perspective. First, from the Russian formalists, we get the crucial distinction between fabula and sujet. Imagine a series of events. A young hero leaves home, faces a monster, rescues a princess, and returns victorious. This is the fabula, the raw chronological sequence of story events as they actually occurred in the narrative world. Now, imagine a storyteller who begins with the hero's return, then flashes back to the monster encounter, and only later reveals why the hero left home in the first place. This is the sujet, the artistic arrangement and presentation of those events. It's the way the story is told, the order in which information is revealed, and the stylistic choices made by the narrator. The formalists argued that understanding the interplay between these two levels was fundamental to analyzing narrative art. Building on this, Tsvetan Todorov expanded this concept into story versus discourse. Story refers to the sequence of events as they happen in chronological order, much like the fabula. Discourse, on the other hand, refers to how those events are narrated. This includes the perspective from which the story is told, first person, third person, the narrative voice, the use of flashbacks or flash forwards, and the overall style and tone. Gérard Genette then added a third crucial layer, narrating. This refers to the actual act of storytelling itself, acknowledging the presence of a narrator and the specific moment of utterance or inscription. It considers who is telling the story, when they are telling it, and why. Finally, Roland Barthes introduced the concepts of syntagmatic versus paradigmatic axes of narrative. Think of a narrative unfolding in time. The syntagmatic axis refers to the horizontal progression of the plot, the chain of events that occur one after another in a linear sequence. It's the what happens next. The paradigmatic axis, however, refers to the vertical layers of interpretation that are evoked at any given point in the story. These are the meanings, associations, symbols, and themes that resonate beneath the surface. For example, if a story features a forest, syntagmatically, it's just a place the character walks through. Paradigmatically, it might evoke ideas of danger, mystery, transformation, or nature's power. Barthes emphasized that true narrative analysis requires understanding both this unfolding sequence and the rich layers of meaning that underpin it. Essentially, structuralists like Todorov and Barthes weren't primarily interested in critiquing the artistic merit of individual stories or interpreting their unique messages. Instead, their core objective was to identify and analyze the universal codes and underlying systems that shape narratives. They treated individual works not as isolated artistic creations, but as concrete manifestations of these broader, foundational narrative structures. Their goal was to move towards a science of narrative, uncovering its deep grammatical rules. Functions, the building blocks of narrative. If narratives are systems, what are their fundamental building blocks? Structuralists identified functions as the smallest meaningful units in a story. These aren't just any random actions or details. They are specific, identifiable actions or statements that are crucial because they either drive the plot forward or provide essential information without which the narrative would be incomplete or incomprehensible. They are the narrative's atomic particles, each contributing to the overall structure and meaning. Roland Barthes, building on earlier structuralist work, developed a very useful taxonomy of these functions, categorizing them based on their role in the narrative. Nuclei. These are the essential plot points. They are absolutely critical to the story's progression. If you remove a nucleus, the entire plot would fundamentally change or collapse. Think of a character making a pivotal, life-altering decision, or a major event like a discovery, a battle, or a betrayal occurring. These are the major turning points. For example, in a detective novel, the discovery of the body is a nucleus. Without it, there's no mystery to solve. Catalysts. These are minor actions or details that advance the plot but aren't strictly necessary for its core progression. They add detail, flesh out the story, and maintain narrative flow, but they don't fundamentally alter the plot's direction. For instance, a character walking down a street or having a casual, informative conversation might be a catalyst. It moves the story along and provides context, but it's not a major turning point. Indices. These functions are less about direct action and more about conveying atmosphere, mood, or character traits. They often provide psychological or emotional information. A description of a gloomy, rain-soaked city would be an index of atmosphere, while a character's nervous habit of twirling their hair would be an index of their personality. They enrich the narrative world and help us understand motivations or emotional states. Informants. These provide specific, factual, and often localized contextual details. They ground the story in a particular reality. Examples include stating the specific time of day. It was precisely 3:17 a.m. The exact location. The events unfolded in a small cafe on the left bank of Paris. Or specific historical background. These details give the story verisimilitude and concrete parameters. Barthes also introduced the concept of sequences, which are logical chains of nuclei. He observed that certain functions tend to appear together in predictable patterns. For example, the sequence of meeting someone might reliably involve an approach, nucleus, followed by dialogue, another nucleus, and then a departure, a final nucleus in that mini-sequence. These sequences form recognizable mini-narratives within the larger story. To illustrate how functions operate, consider Todorov's famous equilibrium model. Many stories begin in a state of equilibrium, a stable, harmonious state. The disruption of that stable state acts as a crucial nucleus, a pivotal event that shatters the initial balance. This disruption then triggers a series of subsequent functions, such as the character's recognition of the problem, their efforts to resolve it, and ultimately, the establishment of a new equilibrium or a changed state. This model highlights how specific functions, like disruption, initiate larger narrative arcs, demonstrating their essential role in narrative progression. Schemata, patterns and narrative structure. Beyond individual functions, structuralists also identified schemata. These are recurring, overarching frameworks that organize stories into recognizable stages or phases. Think of them as the narrative blueprints or archetypal structures that provide a skeletal framework upon which various stories are built. They represent the macro-level patterns that give coherence to a narrative. One highly influential model comes from William Labov, who extensively studied oral narratives. His schema provides a clear, progressive structure for everyday storytelling. Orientation. This is where the storyteller sets the scene, providing crucial context about the characters involved, the time when the events took place, and the physical location. It answers the who, what, when, where questions. Complication. This introduces the central conflict, problem, or unexpected event that disrupts the ordinary course of affairs. It's the what happened. Resolution. This describes how the conflict or problem is resolved, detailing the actions taken and their immediate outcomes. Evaluation. This is a particularly interesting component, where the narrator, or even the story itself, implicitly or explicitly comments on the significance, meaning, or emotional impact of the events. It answers the so what, or why was this important? Coda. While not always present, a coda signals the end of the narrative and often bridges the story back to the present moment of storytelling. Beyond Labov's model, we can observe genre-based phases in many different types of stories. For instance, in many adventure narratives, you typically have a clear setting established, time and place, followed by the emergence of a problem, a disruption or challenge, then a series of actions leading to a solution, the resolution of that problem, and finally, a reaction, the emotional or societal response to the outcome. These phases create predictable expectations for audiences within specific genres. These various schemata highlight a crucial balance that narratives must maintain: temporality and causality. Temporality refers to the linear order of events as they unfold in time. Causality refers to the logical connections between those events, how one event leads to another, creating a sense of cause and effect. Stories aren't just random occurrences strung together. They're structured in ways that establish meaningful connections and logical coherence, ensuring that the audience can follow and understand the progression of events. A well-constructed narrative uses these schemata to create a satisfying and understandable arc. Why structural analysis matters. So after dissecting stories into functions and identifying overarching schemata, why is this rigorous, systematic approach to narrative analysis so important? What insights does it offer that other methods might miss? Unveiling universal patterns. Structural analysis allows us to identify shared elements and deep structures across vastly different cultures and historical periods. This is perhaps its most profound contribution. For example, as we'll discuss, Vladimir Propp identified 31 recurring functions in Russian folktales. What's truly astonishing is that these same functions, like villainy or reward, can be found in stories from ancient Greek myths, African oral traditions, and even modern Hollywood blockbusters. This suggests a deeper, universal human storytelling impulse, implying that our minds might be wired to process narratives in fundamentally similar ways, regardless of our cultural background. It points to a common grammar of storytelling embedded in the human psyche. Illuminating meaning. Making. Structural analysis reveals how the very structure of a narrative shapes its interpretation and meaning. It's not just about what is said, but how it's said. Barth, for instance, emphasized the dynamic relationship between the reader and the narrator, showing how the choices made in discourse, like narrative perspective, focalization, or gaps in information, profoundly affect how we, as an audience, construct meaning and engage with the story. The structure itself becomes a powerful conveyor of meaning, guiding our understanding and emotional response. It helps us see how the how influences the what. Enabling comparative study. By providing a common vocabulary and analytical framework, structural analysis enables rigorous cross-genre analysis. We can compare seemingly disparate narratives, from ancient myths and epic poems to Shakespearean plays, 19th century novels, and even contemporary television series or video games, and still find the same underlying structural principles at play. This allows scholars to make meaningful connections and draw broad conclusions about the nature of narrative itself, transcending specific historical or cultural contexts. It bridges the gap between different forms of storytelling, allowing for a truly unified theory of narrative. To bring this point home, consider Todorov's famous equilibrium theory once more. A story typically begins in a state of equilibrium, stability, then faces a significant disruption, a challenge or problem, leading to a struggle to restore a new equilibrium, a changed but stable state. This elegantly simple schema applies to virtually everything. Think of a classic fairy tale. A happy kingdom, equilibrium, is cursed by a witch, disruption, leading to a hero's quest to break the curse and restore peace, new equilibrium. Or consider a modern film like The Godfather. The initial family harmony, equilibrium, is shattered by an assassination attempt, disruption, leading to a brutal struggle for power and the establishment of a new order under Michael Corleone, new equilibrium. The universality of these structural patterns demonstrates the immense power and utility of structural analysis. Setting the stage for Propp and Bremond. Today's lecture has introduced you to the foundational concepts of narrative structuralism. We've discussed how structuralists view narratives as systems, identified the smallest meaningful units, functions, and explored the overarching patterns, schemata, that give stories their form. This understanding is crucial because it prepares us for a deeper dive into the work of two of the most influential figures in narrative structuralism, Vladimir Propp and Claude Bremond. Their contributions are monumental because they moved from theoretical concepts to concrete, systematic methods for analyzing narrative structures. In our very next lecture, we'll delve deeply into the pioneering work of Vladimir Propp. Propp, a Russian folklorist, undertook an ambitious project. He meticulously analyzed hundreds of Russian folktales. His groundbreaking work, Morphology of the Folktale, published in 1928, identified not just common themes, but precisely 31 recurring functions that define the basic plot progression of these tales. These functions, which he defined by the action they perform, rather than the character performing them, e.g., villainy, delivery of a magical agent, reward, are surprisingly consistent. Propp demonstrated that these functions appear in a fixed, logical sequence, regardless of the specific characters or settings. He essentially created a universal grammar or morphology of the folktale, showing its astonishingly consistent underlying structure. Then we'll turn to Claude Bremond, a French semiotician, who expanded on Propp's model in the 1960s. While Propp focused on a fixed sequence of functions, Bremond introduced the concept of narrative possibilities. He recognized that at certain points in a narrative, characters face choices, and their decisions can lead to alternative trajectories or different branching paths within the plot. Bremond developed what he called elementary sequences that represent potential actions and their outcomes, e.g., an improvement sequence or a degradation sequence. His work introduced a more dynamic understanding of narrative, acknowledging the role of choice and consequence in shaping the story's progression. These thinkers truly exemplify structuralism's ultimate goal: to move beyond subjective interpretation and to decode narratives through systematic, objective, and rule-based analysis. They provided concrete, analytical tools that allowed scholars to dissect stories in unprecedented ways, revealing the hidden, universal patterns that make them work and resonate with audiences across the globe. Conclusion. In sum, structural analysis offers us an incredibly powerful and precise set of tools to dissect narratives into their fundamental functional units and overarching schemata. By doing so, we are able to move beyond the surface details of individual stories and uncover the hidden patterns, the deep grammar, and the universal principles that shape storytelling across cultures and time. As we delve further into the groundbreaking work of Propp and Bremond, we'll see how these principles apply to specific genres and narrative forms, from the ancient oral traditions that underpinned human culture to the complex, multi-layered narratives we consume in modern media today. This approach not only enhances our understanding of individual stories, but also offers profound insights into the very nature of human communication and cultural production. Thank you.